Hello, Freedom Nation. It's Jeff, and we are here for another wonderful episode of the Freedom Nation podcast. Today, my guest is Kerry Ann Powell. Kerry Ann started her career as an attorney, went into both government service, lobbying, and kind of finished her career in the corporate world, working on a major project that you'll get to hear about, a monument in Washington, D.C. From there, she actually went on to found her own business. And today she works with business owners to help them figure out what the challenges are when it comes to scaling their business, building systems, and multitudes of areas around working with those small businesses to help them grow. So I hope you enjoy the show. We'll be right back with you in just a second.
All in you. Everything you're looking for, it's all in you. You gotta believe that it's all in you. Everything you're searching for, it's all in
you. Freedom Nation, it's Jeff here once again. And today we are going to have some fun. I have Kerry Ann Powell on. Kerry Ann started her life as a lawyer and went on to some really fun things. So we're excited to have this conversation. We did a little quick pre-interview, and she's got some really fun things that she's done in her life. And she is somewhere in the world. We'll just say that. So Kerry Ann, welcome to the show, my friend.
Jeff, man, how are you?
I am fantastic. Let's kick us off by telling us your story a little bit. How'd you get started?
Yeah, I was a Washington, D.C. lawyer, lobbyist, and a fundraiser for high-level projects. And so the last one I did before I went into my business was raising the $120 million to raise and build the Martin Luther King Memorial on the National Mall.
I've said it before, but it is the most beautiful. It's the coolest, and thank you for doing that project, because it finally, I think, really laid Martin Luther King out the way he should have been, his prominence in the world. So just awesome project.
I really do.
What a way to go out.
Yeah, right. It was definitely it still remains one of the most fulfilling things I've done. I absolutely love it. As a matter of fact, I still go back. Whenever I get back to DC, I often go, particularly at night, and sit there. It sort of feels spiritual for me. I was able to think things through, and it's one of those days. So yeah, once I did that, I was like, okay, what is the next thing that I'd like to do? What's the next adventure? And I knew that I was leaning towards starting my business and moving into that. So I had started a business, and just while I was building the memorial, while I was just using that entity as I was leading retreats and conferences and such like that.
Okay.
But
your little side hustle for a little bit there.
Exactly. Had a bit of a side hustle.
Love it.
And I really was thinking, what would that look like? So of course, the natural thought was I'd just move into consulting for fundraising, because that's what I do really well. Yeah. And many people were bringing me on. As a matter of fact, I did do that for a bit. But I realized that what I was leaning more towards was the strategic planning, helping companies and organizations, NGOs as well, to really become strategic about how they are going to thrive, whether it's through revenue, whether it's through anything. And so that was really where I began to spark up a bit. And
was that something you were doing before in your other roles, and then this was just a natural extension, or just, hey, I really enjoy this, I'm going that way?
It was something that I'd always done. It wasn't the core primary thing that I did, but I cut my teeth on it from early days coming out of college, going into my first professional career, strategic planning, and being able to figure out not just creating a strategic plan and being strategic about your planning, but also the execution of it. And obviously any big project requires that, Jeff.
Yeah.
And anything that you want to get that's sort of bigger than yourself.
Yeah. It doesn't matter if you're an NGO or you're a company, you've got to raise capital. You got to figure out ways to grow. Yeah.
Exactly. And be able to find a way to execute it. So then I started doing that. And then it just evolved into what I have today, which is a business strategy and consulting company for small and medium-sized companies. So that's how
I got
here.
What a cool story. Now, let's talk a little bit about that. So I own a company. I'm sitting here going, I need to figure out what my next step is. What's your typical engagement with somebody look like?
Yeah, pain is always a bit more, what's the word? Motivating.
Yeah. Yeah.
motivating than
We're either
sort of
going towards pleasure or going away from pain. So
yes.
that's it.
Yes, folks usually come to us when they are experiencing pain. There are
Yeah.
some forward thinkers that are like, hey, we know we have a vision for the company. Can you come in and help us formulate it? And I
Yeah.
love that.
Oh
But
yeah.
for the
Well,
most
those are
part,
the fun ones to work with because you're not trying to drag them along. You
I
they're
know
usually pushing you along. Yeah.
exactly. And there's not like a bloody mess that you got to clean up, right?
Yep.
So when the folks come to me when there's a pain situation, I like to
Hmm.
call that there's a symptom of chaos. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's usually four that I have found and talk about a lot in the
Okay.
company. One is they've been around for a bit and they are not scaling. Like they're
Okay.
growing, but
Yeah.
they're not scaling. And that's a big problem, right? That gap between expenses and revenue continues to stay the same while they grow. And so therefore they're not
Hmm.
scaling. And that's a big problem. That is a symptom of chaos
Yeah.
if it's not happening. Or they're having a cash flow problem. There's no cash, right? It's a cash flow problem. They just can't get it under control. Now, looky here. When you have a small and medium sized company, you're always going to have a bit of ups and downs, right?
Mm.
But when there is perpetual cash problems, that's a symptom of chaos. So they usually come from that.
Okay.
The third one is a lot of the companies that I work with are still owner slash founder operated, or
Hmm.
they are still engaged in the business somehow.
Yeah.
And so the CEO, the founder, the owner cannot step away from the business without feeling like it's going to implode. So
Yep.
they're in it, they're stuck to it. Talk about lack of freedom. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I always put it as you probably left working for somebody else and built the
Mhm.
most beautiful prison in the world that you've locked yourself into.
Felt it. So that's a big one because at first people feel like this is just atheist something like just tough it out, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But when you're in it for a bit, you're like, wait, oh,
Yeah.
there's a problem. I need to fix
This
this.
has got to get better sometime, and it's not because
And
you,
it's
yeah,
not.
yeah. I
Yeah.
told somebody one time, I said, the best thing that ever happened to me was the pandemic because it
Mhm.
made me stop and slow down a little bit and realize that I worked for the worst boss that I'd ever worked for in my life, and it was me.
Yes, so true. Oh my goodness. And I guess the fourth one is a big one, but there's an inability to either build a strong team. The team is
Okay.
subpar. And usually it's funny, Jeff, people come to me and they're like, my team isn't doing well. We need to fix them. And when
Yeah.
I'm always like,
Well, let's start at the top and work down from there. I've had
so
5 divorces, and all those women have been terrible. Maybe there's a common
there's a
trend.
problem, something. Yeah. So those are usually the four main sort of what I call symptoms of chaos that people come to me on. And it just so
Okay.
happens, Jeff, that these are also the top four reasons why businesses fail. Not
Yeah.
why small businesses fail, why all businesses that fail.
Hmm.
Those are the top four reasons. So
Nice.
it's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, though, what I have found is when I work with clients is that my philosophy and what I know to be true about the work that I do is that those are never the real reasons why your business is having these problems. There are these underlying fundamental things that are missing. And the problem that business owners have is that because fish can't see water,
Hmm.
they can't identify really what's the underlying foundational problem that's causing all of this bubbling up chaos that you see
Hmm.
in the business. And they often misdiagnose and spend money and time trying to fix something that's not the actual culprit. And then the never ending cycle of trying to fix it, the morale goes down, the whole thing happens. So I've seen it too many times. So I like to think there's sort of 8 fundamental core things that a business must put into place in order for there to be an addressing of the symptoms of chaos. And it's just go to the doctor. You say you got a backache. You're like, oh, I'm going to go to the doctor. Or you could go on WebMD and you diagnose that you probably have, I don't know, you pulled something out of, when you lifted something and you pulled it, right? But there are many other reasons why you could have a backache. You could have a kidney problem, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's just many reasons why you could have a backache. And so that's the sort of idea is that we basically come in and we're like, okay, we recognize that you have all of these sort of symptoms and we're not going to have a knee jerk reaction and say, oh, you can't scale. So the problem must be XYZ. You maybe need to get whatever. We go in, we do an assessment, an audit, see what's really happening in the company. We see where the red flaming, oh my gosh, moments are. We see the yellows, we see the greens, and then we get to work on creating planning to be able to address those things. And sometimes those things are pretty simple, and
Mm.
sometimes kind of a thing, and there's going to take a while for the company to get out of it. But the bottom line is that once the first step really is becoming aware that there is chaos, because believe it or not, there are a lot of folks that live in chaos, business owners, and they think, well, this is just this is what it looks like
It's
to
normal.
run a
Yeah.
business. Yeah. You're like,
I see
what?
that on the exit planning side. When I work with business owners on the exit planning side, I come into it on the front end of, okay, here's where you need to be, or here's where you are today, here's where you need to be. Well, I need this much money to live on. Okay, great. We're going to have to grow the business. And then you find that unwillingness. There's a lot of lip service of, I
Mhm.
want to grow this business. But then when it comes down to it, you run into you really don't want to, because you don't really want things to change. You want them to just
Exactly.
stay where they are.
Exactly, Jeff. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's so funny you said that around the exit planning because I was
Yeah.
talking to a prospective client. This company had been around for about 50 years. Okay.
Okay.
And it was started by one gentleman, but he was very close to, he hired someone on very early on, and
Hmm.
they were, the other person's family became, so two families are running this business.
Yep.
75% of the folks that work at the company are related to one or the other of those two individuals. Yes. So we've got a whole generation of folks that want to now retire
Sure.
out of the business,
Hmm.
and God bless them, they did have some sort of a plan where there were a couple of folks, the younger generation, they were beginning to train a bit and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's not looking good. They're now having to have conversations around creating the insurance policy in order to be able to get into the whole thing, Jeff. And it was interesting. The person who I was speaking with was the owner, but the person who was like right below the owner, right, the other family member.
Mm. Sure.
And she was really so aware that this was a problem. They needed to do this and stuff, but she just couldn't get all the other folks to come on board
Yeah.
and realize they need to bring someone on board to help them with
Well,
this because
it's funny when they decide, oh, well, we're going to train all these people to do this, but then we're actually never going to give them responsibility to do it. Yes, you're going to be the heir apparent, you're going to be the one to do this, but I'm never actually going to relinquish power to you to
Jeff,
do
you sound
this.
like you're someone who knows a little bit about this
Well, when you were
dynamic.
describing this client, I'm like, oh my God, I've worked with that exact same client.
I know. And I get it, right? Like it's a scary, scary, scary process to
Mhm.
relinquish something where your blood, sweat, and tears. And but it's also scary where you're like, if you cannot pass this on in a way where the business can thrive,
Yep.
because what is the percentage that I read? I think it was like something around 80% of companies where you pass on to the family members of family, the business fails within one generation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I mean, it's typically 80% of second generation businesses fail, and then 70% of third generation businesses fail. So you look at that. Okay. By the time we get to the third generation,
It's done.
it's basically a zombie at that point
It's
because
done.
you've lost that because they don't do a good job of making that transition.
Yes, yes. And then people always mistake what they could sell something for because
Oh,
they're
yeah.
like, yo, I want to sell it by multiples. Okay, sweetie, systems in the business.
It does, yeah. So basically, the business is run on paper, and you're passing paper around. I think the other side of the coin too is a generational shift too, because
Yes.
the bulk of businesses, small businesses today, are owned by
Mm-hmm.
baby boomers,
Mm-hmm.
and they're the largest generation and the
Yes,
highest percentage of people
that's true.
who own businesses of any generation,
Yes.
followed up with our generation, which is
Mm-hmm.
coming behind them. We're the smallest generation
Mm-hmm.
and the least percentage of business owners. So if you're that baby boomer, you better do some work
Yes.
because our generation also says, I don't want to work 90 hours a week.
Yes. It's so true. It's so true. And I'm curious too. It's like there's a certain amount of, I often say, a business is an entity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Outside of yourself, because so many people don't really realize that you yourself are not, a business is an entity outside of yourself that's designed for the purpose of creating value, generating
Mm.
value
Yep.
to the stakeholders, the customers, the owners, the employees, the investors, whatever. So if this company here is so in your hands and so you're so tightly connected to it in a way that you can't, if you step away from it in
Mhm.
any form or fashion, it doesn't exist or does implodes. You've done such a disservice to all
Yeah.
of the other stakeholders, your customers. Think about it.
Boy.
Your
Yeah.
customers, your employees, it's not fair.
No.
It's not
No.
fair. So
Well, and not to say also that that psyche that, you know, I built this whole business up and then I walked away and it just all fell apart. And that has to do some damage to your psyche as
I'm sure
well.
it does. I'm
You
sure it
know,
does. I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does. And it's, I guess it's either, and I don't like to think of it medicine, but either take your medicine now,
yeah.
or you can take the medicine later, but you're going to take the medicine. All right.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. At
do
some
it
point,
now.
it's going to happen.
Do it now. Do it now. But yeah, so that, to answer your question, that is how we engage with
Nice.
owners. They come to us, they either could say, hey, like one of my more recent clients that came a couple months ago is, look, we're getting ready to scale and we're getting ready to scale big. And I need you to come in and do this. And it's fantastic. We love it. We know we're doing all, we
Mm.
have the time to do the strategic planning that, because normally if it's a crisis, I like to have time and let the strategic planning process marinate, because obviously you can always do a 3-day offsite and do the whole thing, but there is something around getting people in their thought process and letting things sit for a bit. Let them say, I came back and I thought about this and actually I realized this is the direction we want to go, or this is how
Mm.
fast we want to scale, or all of these different things. But nonetheless, this particular type of way, we love doing that because then it
Yeah.
allows for, and it gives you the time, the oxygen, the room for the entire team to be a part of that process. When there is crisis, it's a little bit difficult because now you're like, you got to
Yeah.
stopgap a couple things, right? People are bleeding, like the company's bleeding, and you just got to clean it
Yeah.
up and
You got to do whatever you can, put the lipstick on the pig and get it. Okay, let's, all right. We've patched it up. We've put some duct tape and baling wire on it.
yeah, but I love it. We love it. It's a great way to impact and help companies, owners, because when everything is all said and done, and they look at you and they're like, oh, thank you, God
Yeah.
bless you. I'll give you my firstborn. That kind of thing.
Whatever it takes, just please don't ever leave me.
You realize you've done something, and of course, when the employees are like,
Yeah.
they're like,
Yeah. Well, because so many
"What's the
times they know the problem, they've seen the
They
problems,
say it.
and they just can't. Sometimes takes that person coming in from the outside to go, have you ever thought that the problem is you? Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, everybody's been telling me that over these years. I just didn't listen to them.
Didn't listen, didn't listen.
That's awesome.
Oh
Well,
goodness.
is there anything new in your world that you want to share with the world now, or?
One of the things that's really exciting is that a couple months ago we launched a what we call a monthly dose of strategy for small and medium sized
Okay.
businesses live that we do on LinkedIn, and we stream it to YouTube and Facebook. And I was just doing it as a way to add value and to keep our fist
Hmm?
out there. But we're really loving it. And now so we started adding guests and bringing people on and having real conversations around it. So it's called the Founders Check-in. And it's something that we're really enjoying because it's just a quick dose of strategy. Like, do it, get
Yeah.
it done, move on. None of
Yeah.
we don't got to go into the details of it if you want to get more details of different pharmacy, but it's really been
What?
great because we do it the first Thursday of every month,
Okay.
and it's just something that brings, and it also brings people together, other business owners. What are you doing? What's your company? And we have them type them
Mm.
in, and what are the problems that you're dealing with? And it really gives a space for people to just share, because that is the one thing I think about being an owner, founder, or a business, a CEO, is it's a bit of a lonely journey.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, well, because daddy can't tell you, yeah, daddy can't tell all the kids all the problems that are going on. Otherwise, they're all going to bolt and leave the company. So,
yes,
yeah, it's a lonely job.
it's a lonely
And there's
job.
virtually nobody you can talk to.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate because I work with my wife.
Yeah.
So we know what's going on inside the company, and we at least have somebody to talk. We can talk to each other as we go through it. That's one thing when people are like, I can't work with my spouse. I'm like, I love it. One, because she
Yes.
does stuff that I am terrible at. But two, it's having that person to bounce ideas off of,
There is
having
something
that person,
so good
it's,
about
you've
that.
got to find that, whatever it is, whether it's doing your version of it, getting into a Vistage group, whatever it is, you've got to find
You
other
must
people that
find
are in your seat.
You must find it. And you talk about freedom. There is a certain feeling of freedom that
Yeah.
happens when you hear someone say, "Me too," right?
Yeah.
I get it.
Mm-hmm.
You're not the only
Had that.
one.
I got the same problem. Let's figure out how we can fix it together.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It takes some weight off you and you're like, okay,
Yeah.
bam. Because there it is. If you don't, we're always told, particularly if you own a business, the idea is you should know what you're doing. And I
Hell,
get
most of us are making it up every day. What are you talking about?
I know. So yeah, so that's something that I'm really excited about, and we've been doing it for a couple months now.
That's awesome.
I've been driving. We're
Well,
doing
and I
it. It's
mean,
fun.
I look at it the other way too. It trains your future clients too.
Yeah.
You can refer to, hey, we do this every month. And if they're not quite ready to work with you yet, they start to see the value of that. I mean,
Yes.
it's a great way of doing it. It's
Yes.
what we
Yes.
do I do this with the podcast. I do this with our YouTube channel, that very same thing. It's, hey, I just want to share with you my ideas, and maybe you're not ready today, but you might be ready
Love
somewhere down
ready.
the road.
Yeah. And then when you are, we're here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. You know where to find us at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Let's transition to the fast 5 questions now.
Bring it on.
You ready?
Ah,
All right.
sure, Jeff.
Number 1, you wake up in the morning. Your business is gone. Still have the knowledge in your head, $500 in your pocket, a laptop computer, place to live. What are you going to do first?
I'm gonna first, obviously, once you do the centering part, you're like, you're okay. The world is not falling apart. I reach out to my network.
Okay.
I have found that even though I am like the queen of strategy, and every one of those tests, they do those little tests, that they personality test, disc, blah blah blah.
Yep.
I always am all on the high part of strategy. But what I have found, all of the success, I say not some, all of the successes in my life is because of my network.
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time, yeah, have a plan, know how you're going to execute it exceptionally, do what you need to do, bring your people along. So I go to my network, I'll call people, start having conversations, and then see where it goes.
See, yeah, here's what I can do. Help me to get in front of those people.
Yes.
What is the biggest business mistake you've ever made?
I try to scale too fast. Yeah. I tell a story whenever I speak at conferences all the time, and I tell a story, and it's embarrassing, but I'm not embarrassed about it anymore, because I think it's important to drive it home. It is better to not scale at all than to scale too fast.
Yeah.
I think that the stats are 2 out of 3 companies that have made it to the Inc. 5000's fastest scaling companies and fail. Meaning they either sell their companies at a loss, go completely out of business within 6 years after hitting scale.
After hitting that, after hitting the list. Yeah, because you get so focused on, I'm trying to hit this list, I'm trying to hit this prize, and then you get there. I was listening to a YouTube thing today, a guy that's talking about scaling YouTube channels, and he said the same thing. He said 3/4 to almost 80, I think 80 to 90% of YouTube channels that reach the monetization stage, which is it takes a long slog to get there. 80% of them never scale beyond that, because they literally burn themselves out, and they had this prize. Oh, I'm going to get monetized. And that's just the beginning. And I think that's the same thing. You get so many of these people, they just get burned out.
Yes.
The business kind of just burns out because, okay, we've pushed and we just can't push anymore, or we just don't want to push.
Exactly. Yeah. A large part of what I do with people is just helping them figure out how fast they want to scale, what does scale look like for them, and being able to make sure they're creating capacity within their team and themselves so that they're not going to burn out at the end.
Yeah. Well, and they have to understand too, they're going to have to invest for 2 to 3 years down the road, not that you might not get immediate return on. You're going to have to invest, because you can't, if you don't put the infrastructure in place. Yeah. It's there. I saw it from going from a very large practice where I sold out and then started anew again. And I realized, here's all the mistakes we made before. We didn't automate the practice enough from the beginning. And it was this time, all right, before I start adding people, I need to get all the systems in place, and I need to think about this as if I was training people
Yes. Jeff,
to
what
do
you
this.
just said, people, that's like $1 million advice right there.
Yeah.
And people hear and they're like, okay, we systemize. That is $1 million advice, people. If you're listening right there, automating your business before anything else,
Mhm.
making it a scalable company is the most important thing, even more important than scaling.
Yeah. And don't start to look at every processy that you have in your business. And if there's something can be bogged down by a person in that process, okay, what can be automated around
Yes,
that to free that person up?
precisely.
And we don't have to rely on those little clogs in the business.
Precisely.
And you constantly have to be thinking about it.
You
That's the
have to
way
be
I look at
perpetually. That's why one of the 8 components that I always talk about
it.
within
Okay.
the things is this idea of innovation and optimization together,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And this idea you need to constantly be innovating, but you need to constantly optimizing as well. And sometimes those
Hmm.
things can sort of hit against each other because
Yeah.
if you're perpetually optimizing on your current systems and the innovation feels like it's faltering. But both those things have equal weight. And if you don't have a process to make sure you're doing that, that is also a problem too, because then it
Plus,
goes
the
back to
innovation side of it's way more fun than the
of
optimization
course, it's
part of
more
it,
sexy,
too.
Jeff.
What's a great book that you'd recommend for our audience?
I have to admit that there have been so many great ones, right? And I
Mm.
know you're going to hate me. I'm going to go say with two if you don't mind. We've got,
No, please.
if you are someone who's hasn't read the E-Myth yet,
Yeah.
you must read it. It is an oldie but a goodie, but it's the fundamentals I think still remain in its, I don't know, 30 years in, right?
Yeah.
So if you haven't read the
Yeah.
E-Myth,
And
read
like
it.
three updates since.
Yeah, totally, right? Michael Gerber is the man. So
Yeah.
I would say definitely that. One book I have been really jonesing on lately is Jim Collins' BE 2.0, Beyond
Okay.
Entrepreneur 2.0. It's the updated version he did
Yeah.
during 2020 or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm loving this book. I started reading it about a year and a half ago, and I just go back to it because there's some such really principled things in there. Because Jim Collins is fantastic. He's the guy
Yeah.
who brought us to BHAG. So I would say if you've done E-Myth, you got it. Go check out Beyond Entrepreneurship 2.0.
Okay. Awesome. That's one I haven't heard in a while. Usually you hear good to great with him. So
Yes, yes. You see, what I love about BE 2.0 is because, and he says it, he said he wrote it specifically for small businesses
yeah.
because he said he actually, and it's interesting, when he started working at Stanford, it was all about entrepreneurship. That's what he was teaching back at
Yeah.
Stanford. But he's
Yeah.
always,
And then he morphed into the working with the big monster businesses.
right,
And yeah.
yes. And he says it. People always think of me as this big company guy. No, I really am at the sore core. The reason why I started looking at big companies and the ones that are great is to sift out the
Hmm.
principles of those
Yeah.
that they did so that small businesses can begin to implement them because so they can last and be great. And I was like,
Hmm.
good for you, Jim. I'm with you on
Yeah.
that.
Go
So
back. Yeah. Go back to your roots, bud.
your roots.
What's a good tool that you use in your business every day?
Okay, so many good ones, but this one is the one that I am going to stand on this hill. 90IO. It's I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's basically
Uh-uh.
an operating system, a platform, and the whole thing around this. And I've basically started bringing like all my clients into 90IO. It is
Cool.
the place where you can begin to upload your entire strategic plan, all your KPIs, all the ownership within the
Nice.
company of all the things that are important to you, and be able to track those babies because you know what? 67% of fantastic strategic plans fail because of lack of implementation. Why don't they
Sure.
implement? Is because they can't track it. There's not a place to go look at it. Back in the day, Jeff, you do a strategic plan, you put in a cute little folder. It's all fancy, lovely brown. It's in the CEO's office. You know,
Yeah.
you walk by it, and that's
Nobody looks at it again. And
you don't ever see
yeah,
it. You don't even remember what it was about until you go back and
I
do
love
another
it.
offsite. So this is a great place that if you have some vision of the company, some goals, some KPIs, some core strategic goals that you're going, put them in there. have people own it, own their responsibility in it. You can do weekly check-ins, monthly check-ins, quarterly check-ins. It's a great tool. I love it.
That's fantastic. And it all rolls up to the top, I'm assuming, in the company and everything
Yes, it rolls to
else.
the top. And like you as a business owner can then look at you if you don't want to go into the weeds, you can just look at your dashboard and see, okay, what's happening with all of these different things. I know I talk with my hands, it's so
Nice.
funny. But you can just go in and see the big picture stuff. Or if you want to go in the if you notice that something's happening in the business and you're like, but why is this always red? You can go to
Yeah.
the department where the lag is and you could have some conversations with the folks who are leading that particular thing or who own it. But you can go straight to it. Also, it makes your meetings more efficient. There's a whole function within 90IO where there's a whole thing called meetings. Like you literally click
Okay.
it generates the meeting agenda for you, and it generates the things that you need to focus on. You're not talking about the things that are green. It just sort of you're talking about things that are red, how to move red to yellow, and how to move yellow to
Okay.
green. And that's
Yeah.
really it's you know how people always say, "Oh, this could have been an email." That kind of I think a ridiculous thought, but nonetheless, whatever. I get it. It's frustrating. Once you do that, you'll never have the this could have been an email kind of complaint because it's more
Yeah.
about the metrics, the KPIs. This is what we decided we were going to do. This is what you need to be doing. How can we support you, get you from this red to this green? What is the problem? And you begin to solutionize there. So it's a great tool. I love
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. That's awesome.
it.
Well, cool. So, final question for you.
Yeah.
What is your definition of freedom?
I just when you read that question, I was like, oh my goodness, there's so many things. I think freedom to be able to, when I wake up in the morning, to choose what it is that I am going to do and
Okay.
feel like I have chosen this. So whatever it is, if it's simple, right? One of the things I love doing in the morning after I get up and go take a walk is to have a nice cup of chai and listen to some jazz before romanticize my
Yeah.
life, pretend I'm in somebody's movie. I think a part of that is just the idea of deciding that I've chosen to do this thing today.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And it's such a great answer. Kerry Ann, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to learn more about you?
Yeah, I love connecting with people. I'm always hanging out
Okay.
on LinkedIn. If you're there, DM me and say, "Hey, I'm with Jeff's crew." I'd love to meet you and say hi and really connect because I think that's really, in the end of the day, I just believe people are really the currency of life. That's what makes the world go around is us.
I love
Um,
it.
if you find that when I mentioned some of the chaotic stuff we talked about earlier, if you feel like you're in that chaos and you'd like to fix it, I do have a wonderfully free PDF that just I downloaded my brain into that, the 8 things that I think it helps you identify really what may be happening in your business and some solutions
Yeah.
around it. So you can download that. It's called the 8 True Culprits That Are Causing Chaos in Your Business. And you can find
Ooh, I
it
love it.
at nobusinesschaos.com.
Business
Nobusinesschaos.com.
case tech.
Download it. It's free of charge just for you. Because I don't think anybody should be living in chaos. Not good.
No, not fun. We'll make sure we put all that information into the show notes so that you've
Thank you,
got that in
Jeff.
there. Kerry Ann, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having
You
me.
are just, you're so much fun to talk to. So,
Loved having conversations with you, Jeff. You're the man, I tell you.
yeah, it's so much fun. I want to continue the relationship down the road here. So thank you. And folks, thank you for joining us today. We do these for you. So certainly if you enjoyed this, share it with somebody. Make sure you subscribe to the channel wherever you're listening or watching this. And we will see you guys back here on Tuesdays and Thursdays of every single week.
Fantastic.
Awesome.